We are being told to choose between the left and right brain, between studying art and engineering, between creative and analytical thinking. Our society tells us that art and business are not connected. But what if society is wrong? What if it's misleading us? The good news is that understanding what art is can bring us to a new revelation. Art does matter in innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. And with the help of this podcast and its guests, you as well will learn that art is not an object. Art is a mindset. You are listening to the Artian podcast. With me, Nir Hindi. Good afternoon, listeners, and thank you for joining us at the Artian podcast. And today we're actually saying hello from Tel Aviv. And today I have with me Elon Ganor, serial entrepreneur, and in a second you will hear what else he is doing in his life. But before that, Elon, first of all, thank you for joining us at our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Nir. Pleasure, as usual.
So I want you to take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, by profession, I'm a medical doctor. I graduated at Tel Aviv University long time ago. I'm not going to say how long because people will know how old I am. After that, after my army service as a physician, I switched to become a serial entrepreneur. Serial because I created a few companies, startups. Some of them were very successful in various areas, specifically in the medical field and internet-related companies.
So can you share with us some of your business ventures? Because you stand behind one of, I think, I would say iconic companies, the mid-90s in Israel.
You know, today you and I were talking over WhatsApp, and that is basically using a technology called VoIP, which stands for Voice over Internet Protocol. I have to admit, proudly, humbly but proudly, my company, not just mine, I was one of a few, called VocalTec, was the first company ever inventing and developing voice over internet protocols. The initial product was called Internet Phone. It was started in February of 1995. We released a product at the time that was called Internet Phone, which enabled people to use their computers at the time to speak over the internet network with each other through the sound cards that were in their PCs. What's interesting maybe to mention that it was very early on, because I've checked recently how many subscribers were on the internet overall in February of 96. Can you guess how many? Today we have 4 billion or 5 billion? Or there were only 16 million people on the internet. Getting on the internet was very tough at that time. It wasn't easy, technically. If you wanted to get on the internet, you had to be quite technical yourself in order to know how to use. Anyway.
So this company, which name?
VocalTec. VocalTec was the first company who is being accredited for being the first VoIP company ever.
And this is also your first company that you IPO'd at the Nasdaq, correct?
That is correct.
And you were involved in different ventures, and some of them, if I recall correctly, is also in developing some of the first HIV test.
That is correct too. That is way before. It's earlier. That was a company called Viroval, which was Swiss-based, by the way, with laboratories, the scientific laboratories in Gothenburg in Sweden, with a group of Swedish scientists, virologists. That company was the first company ever, in 1987, by the way, which developed an HIV diagnostic markers and test for the detection of HIV. HIV, in 1987, it was the beginning of that plague. It started a bit earlier, but in 1987, it was really an outcry because many people got infected, people died, and there was no way of testing if somebody had gotten the disease. And this was the first company ever to use synthetic peptides. What does that mean? It meant that since in the ability to develop synthetic peptides was the developed, the scientists had basically taken portions of the virus itself and synthesized it in the lab to see if that portion that they did actually reacted. And sure enough, they succeeded quite rapidly, within 6 to 8 months, to find a certain peptide named GP, glycoprotein 41. I can proudly say to you now, again proudly, humbly but proudly, that every AIDS test today, 2019, used by any diagnostic company worldwide, whether Abbott or all of them, they're all using that GP41 peptide that we were the first to develop. The reason they're all using it is because, number one, it's good. Number two, they don't need to pay anything because the patents had already expired since then.
Okay, so you did the R&D already for some of the biggest companies.
And we sold it at the time successfully, also commercially, to Pharmacia, which later merged with Upjohn, a big pharmaceutical company in Sweden.
So the VocalTec was one of the first company you IPO'd, and you actually IPO'd another one. Obviously, you have a lot of experience in the world of entrepreneurship. And part of being an entrepreneur is actually the ability to challenge the status quo, like you did with HIV, trying to find a solution, like trying to create the first internet phone in 95. And I'm wondering, what drove you to challenge the status quo in the different companies you have?
That is a tough question. I'm not sure if I could say or quote specifically a specific driver that drove me to challenge a specific area. It's not as if I came to the idea that I wish to challenge the world telephony system, the telecom environment, in order to create telephony or global telephony, which will be cheaper than the others. Or the same applies to the idea in the HIV or AIDS area. It's not that I had a goal which I set for myself and went ahead to try to find. It was more of a coincidence that came out as a consequence of something that I probably have, which is serious curiosity and interest in futuristic directions. I was always fascinated by the future, by where are we going. And when you are all the time on the edge and reading and being interested in different items and fields that are moving forward, then suddenly you have a situation where two fields which are seemingly not related to each other, they merge. And when that happens, then something new is happening.
So it's kind of creating connections between the unconnected fields or seemingly unconnected fields.
Right. I can give you one example. There are plenty of examples. A good example is photography. If you look at the camera as we know it, the analog camera, it's suppose this is the formal or the normal. If you look Google or Wikipedia or anywhere, historical books, photography was invented in 1837. Basically, it brought two disciplines from science to a single box, chemistry and physics. The physics dealt with the optical part, the use of the Camera Obscura, that was known since the early days of Leonardo da Vinci and even earlier than that, where you took a box with a hole in it, and the ray light, light rays came into the box and were projected on the back side of the camera. It's not the camera yet. When the moment came and a certain scientist realized that in chemistry you take a silver nitride and it turns black when exposed to the sun, when exposed to light. So if you take that and you put it on a glass plate and you will portray the image that is coming through the Camera Obscura, here you have an image. Here you have a photo. These are the first photos. This is 1837. What's interesting is that chemists, scientists that were in the chemistry area did not know the optical side, and physicists that for hundreds of years knew about the physics of it, they didn't know about the chemical side. Once these two things came together, bingo. These are two disciplines merging together to create something entirely new.
We'll speak about this separation between disciplines later. So, it's kind of, obviously, it's not necessarily what drove you to change the status quo, but it's rather more your interest in the future and connecting unconnected fields. And obviously, you're an experienced entrepreneur and you had different companies. And I always say that entrepreneurship is a way of living. We are living in an era that everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and we see companies that encouraging entrepreneurial mindset. And I often think that people see entrepreneurship as a job or as a title. And I claim that it's a way of living. And as such, it obviously includes ups and downs. And since you were involved in so many kind of companies and ventures, I'm interested to ask you, what are the 2 or 3 beautiful memories that you have from your entrepreneurial ventures?
That's a tough question. I have many. It's hard to pinpoint. The life of an entrepreneur, a true entrepreneur, is built up of ups and downs, of very high points to some very low points. The distance between the high point and the low point sometimes is 24 hours. It's a roller coaster trip. It's a travel which is not an easy one because you're emotionally bouncing between the highs and the downs. Obviously, if you want to pinpoint most people, probably including myself, would pinpoint the high points because...
So can you give us 1 or 2 points? I mean, if I were you, I would probably pinpoint one of them that IPO'd my company, and I don't know if you rang the bell, but I would love to ring the bell if they do it today. Back then.
They do it, and I'll jump straight to the ringing the bell. I was invited once to the Nasdaq to ring the bell. It was the Israeli consulate, because we took the company public, not at the IPO, but a few years later. And for some reason, I didn't show up that morning, and I did not ring the bell, which was a big screw up on my part. So this is a bit funny. But it's the first time I shared this information. I never told anyone because I was quite ashamed of not showing up for such an important event. But it also
makes you kind of very unique that you are invited, but you forgot to go.
Yeah, not exactly forgot to go, but I didn't go. Never mind. The point, if I have to try and pinpoint, it's obviously, as I said, the high points, which we remember better, but there were also low points. So let me go into specifics. We tried with our developers at VocalTec to develop the product, which was an internet phone. Initially, we developed it over local area networks. So initially, we showed the first product on the Novell system with 2 computers connected to each other with cables, really. And we showed how you speak from one computer to the other. This was in 1993, in May of 1993, in a trade show in Atlanta, in the US. In 95, we showed it over IP, which is basically a wide area network and not a local area network. Before that, we did a lot of testing in the lab. We had a beta tester, which was a professor at Cambridge in England, in the computer science department of Cambridge. The very first time, our company was very small and poor, money-wise. So we didn't even have our own connection to the internet, not even a 16 meg connection. So our friends at a very large company today, Checkpoint, they had more money, and they had their own 64 meg connection to the internet, because they were developing a product for the internet as well. And they, when more or less they were finishing the day work at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., or even later, they allowed us to come and test our upcoming internet phone on their network. And
So being
one
frugal
day,
and resourceful.
so they had more resources, and they were very nice with us. They were developers that were very friendly and good friends of our developers, and that's how the connection was made. So they allowed us to use their laboratory. And I remember the first time we tried our internet phone in order to speak, we sent the software to that professor in Cambridge. So one evening, 8 or 9 p.m., we're sitting there, and we are, for the first time ever, trying to use the internet phone. And hello there, can you hear me? And out from the speaker in a poor quality voice comes the answer in a British accent by that professor. That was a real moving moment.
Exciting.
It was exciting. It was like, the first telephone call, like a famous call by Alexander Graham Bell between his office and Boston. I mean, there's a very famous story about that. So this was a moving moment. I remember that very well.
Did you have after 24 hours, maybe down, or can you remember one down?
I don't remember a down after this one. We had plenty of downs along the way. And those were usually when we were getting close to, using our resources nearly to the most and having to raise additional capital or moving with an investor along the path of an investment into the company. And the negotiation goes very well forward. And in the very last moment, things explode in your face and the deal doesn't go through. And those were...
So what do you do in that case?
You nearly commit suicide. Of course not. Of course not. But believe me, that's a real low. It's a real low. And what do you do? First of all, you have to relax a day or two after this terrible downturn. And then you are reshuffling your own cards and rethinking. And you keep on working hard in order to get to the next investor until you find the one that will invest. Obviously, you are very close to the red line and to the red zone where your company might go bankrupt. And the bad thing about this entire entrepreneurship and startup high-tech area is that I am sure that there are very good companies with excellent products that indeed went down, did go bankrupt, although they had a phenomenal product, and investors which are obviously less futuristic or less brilliant. Not all, of course, there are some brilliant investors too, but there are some that didn't understand and let them go down.
But didn't have the patience.
Or didn't have the patience or so forth. So this is really, as I said, the term roller coaster suits very well here.
Okay. So for the entrepreneurs that listening over here, if you have a bad day or bad situation, take 1 or 2 days to relax and recover, and you go again on this ride. What connected us is not only that you are an entrepreneur. One other aspect of your profile is that you're also an artist. And at the age of 56, you left what you're doing to study art. That's a brave decision. And I'm very interested to hear, how did you come about that? Like leaving everything at the age of 56 and going to study art?
Well, it's not exactly just like that. It starts earlier. Since I was a kid, I loved the movies. I loved always to read a lot, and I loved the movies. And many, many times in my life I said that my dream, my wish is that when I will get to the age of 50, I want to retire from everything I do and go make movies. That was my dream. And I fulfilled, maybe not, more or less what I said, because I didn't leave everything I do at 50, because it wasn't possible. I left everything I do more or less at 56, which was 2006. I happened to get involved through a friend of mine who invited me to join him in a certain workshop with a very famous Israeli artist, photographer, Adi Nes, whose work is a work of art which is very known internationally. He's one of the most successful artists in Israel. He does photography, which is stage photography. So I joined a certain workshop, 12 meetings. These are stills photography, and I got hooked. I loved it. I just loved it. After this 12 meetings, took 3 months or so, at that specific workshop with Adines, who later became a good friend and a mentor for me, I wanted more. 12 lessons basically were not enough. I was eager to learn more. So with his recommendation, I found another mentor, which is a famous and successful Israeli artist called Michal Heiman. She's a known name here.
Yeah.
And I took me time, but I convinced her to become like a private mentor, like in the Middle Ages, where artists studied by sitting by the side of a big artist and learning from him. So for 1 year, I sat with her once a week on Thursdays at 5 o'clock, her studio, and she was teaching me art. And she asked me at the beginning, what do you want from me? I said, I want you to teach me art. She took it seriously, and we were sitting, and I was listening mostly. And she gave me, of course, all kind of projects and homework that I had to fulfill, and she was criticizing, giving me critique on my work, whether good or bad, and so forth. For 1 year, I worked with her, and after 1 year, I came to the conclusion, no, it's not enough. I have to learn more. I need deeper diving here, and I enlisted to Israel, one of Israel's better art schools. The famous one is Bezalel in Jerusalem. I still have a bit of bad feelings about them because they were not accepting students older than 35. They were limiting the age of the students. Which
you have a word for it, no?
Ageism.
Yeah.
It's ageism. It's just like gender. I mean, we are living in times where it should be totally illegal, but that's what Bezalel, I think it's still doing, by the way. The second best school was the Midrasha in Bet Berl, and they are in Tel Aviv, which is also easier for me because I live in the Tel Aviv area. So I enlisted there, and I graduated in 2008.
And you studied for 3 years?
I studied for 3 years,
photography
and art. Okay. By my main was photography. And I became an artist photographer. So, and that's something I have great passion for.
So you mentioned that you have had this passion for movies since you were very young, at a young age. Where did it come from, this passion for movies? I mean, did you see it at home? This passion for art?
Well, that is a question which is very hard to answer. I can try to answer at least part of this. My late mother was a painter. And the house I grew up in with my parents had a passion for art and a lot of respect for culture in general. My father was a pediatrician, but his side thing, his hobby was history. And he wrote a book about history, a very serious and deep book called Who Were the Phoenicians? So my parents were visiting museums, and our house was full of books, art books and history books and literature. And
so you were surrounded and you had
I was surrounded by culture, I may say. I was lucky enough to be surrounded by such parents. So that is maybe part of
the influence.
But I'm not sure that this is the only one. The attraction, I don't remember my parents going to the movies so much. Nearly not at all. If at all, I would remember them, or I do remember them. My father usually totally in a book. He is always with a book. At that time, there was no TV yet. And at a later point, TV came already into our lives, but they were not really sitting. Later on, when my parents got older, they were also hung on TV. But before, no, they were always with a book or my mother painting or doing something. My attraction to the movies, I don't know, through the whole environment. my friends' kids at school, we were going to the movies together. The movies was a big deal. It was a big thing. And we were going to the movie theater quite a lot.
Do you have a favorite movie?
If I have one...
If you needed to choose one.
No, I wouldn't do that. It's not right to do because there's not... I have many favorite movies and they are really superb movies. And I still go to the movies, by the way, and I enjoy it. And I even write sometimes critique on a specific movie I saw on my Facebook. I post a critique on Facebook. And recently I saw some very good movies. The names are always a problem because I tend to forget the names. But a long history, of course, there were, the Italians.
So it's not a wonder that you are also married to an artist. I saw the jewelry that your wife creates. Beautiful. More of a statue than just a jewelry.
I don't know. I really don't know, what creates attraction between a couple to fall in love and get married to each other is a complicated subject, and I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I definitely don't know.
We are together already since 1971, so it's a lot.
Quite some time.
It's quite some time.
Yeah.
At that time, she was not really doing, but apparently she was attracted to it. She's a sculptor, and she's a jewelry designer, and there's no difference between the jewels and the sculptures, which are big. A sculpture can be a few meters in size, very big, and her jewelry are small sculptures, very small. The type that you wear on a finger
very beautiful.
Or around your neck.
The one that I saw.
So she appreciates. I'm very lucky with that because when we are traveling, we go and enjoy museums and galleries together. I'm extremely lucky also that she fell in love as well with photography, and she's an excellent photographer. We travel quite a lot worldwide, and we usually both carry serious cameras with us, and we both take pictures.
So I have a question over here.
Yeah.
Why did you choose photography over other mediums in art?
I always enjoyed photography. I cannot answer the question. I don't know the answer. Partially, maybe I do. I have two left hands. I'm not good at painting, and I never tried or never been good sculpturing. Didn't attract me so much, although I appreciate immensely good sculpturing. I can appreciate a good work of art, whether sculpturing or painting and so forth. Maybe it's the combination that the camera bring together, both the ability to create images and the technology advancement in a camera. I always attracted to technology and technical advancements. I can say one thing about photography, which I keep repeating and maybe boring my wife by saying it, but photography to me is a miracle, is a total miracle. I'm always again and again and again, although I've been doing this for so many years already, I used to take pictures since I was bar mitzvah, since I was 13. So it's only after 56 that I started doing it more professionally and more into the art direction. But taking pictures, I started as a child.
Very young age, yeah.
Yes. Still today, I look at taking a picture as a miracle. There are two big miracles which I'm always astounded by. One is flying, getting on an airplane
I feel
and
the
seeing
same.
this huge bird with hundreds of people taking, it's so heavy. And I understand the physics of it. I understand
it's like a magic.
the mechanics, and I understand the wind. And I completely understand the avionics of how an airplane is flying. And I'm still astounded and blown away by the fact that such a big bird with tons of metal is flying up in the air.
What is the second miracle?
The first one is the camera.
Okay.
They're taking a picture where you are basically putting in a print mode a moment. It's not a moment. It's a millisecond fraction of a life that you are, pushing a button, and you are basically freezing a moment in life for eternity. Probably for eternity. And not surely, but probably. That's a miracle.
So I want to ask you, I want to ask you about this exactly, one of these miracles that you created and kind of shooting this moment. Because in your art, in at least some of your series, and in a second we'll talk about the others, but one of the series of photography that you actually created kind of relate to your business background. You created a series called Wall Street, and for someone that IPO to companies, you know Wall Street ins and outs and its way of operating. But you chose kind of a critical point of view of Wall Street. I'm interested to kind of hear about this series, Wall Street, and why. Why creating this?
The series is made of 7 photos done with a large format camera, and they are stage photographs. And yes, they express a major criticism I had over the Wall Street practice or practices, which I encountered while being there. And there were many things during my interaction with Wall Street that I didn't like, which I didn't appreciate. I really didn't like. Being a CEO, for example, every investment banker at the time, large firms, they had 2 major sections, the analysts and the investment bankers themselves. Now, there is an inherent conflict between these 2 portions of the investment banking institute. Why? Because if the investment bankers are taking a company, your company, another company, public, they want people to buy the stock, right? And they want the analysts to write good things about the stock and about the company. Because if they will, the analysts will say, this is a bad company, don't buy their stock, it's against the interest of the investment banker that want to sell the stock. So the common saying at that time in Wall Street was that we have so-called a Chinese wall between the 2 departments. We are not allowed legally to talk with each other among the fence or the Chinese wall. And as such, but I found that it's BS. It's not really true. I mean, I believed, not that I found any proof, but I sensed that they are talking to each other. And the relationship are problematic. And later on, when I did my photography series, I researched the term Chinese wall, what they're using. So obviously, in the eye of the layman, Chinese wall is something extremely solid, very thick, very big, right? That's also BS. I mean, it's not really such a solid wall as the image of or the imagination of people. So even the investment banking definition of Chinese wall is based on something which is based on a wall full of holes. It's not a real thing. And by the way, one of my pictures was the Chinese wall, and trying to show. And in my Chinese wall, you have a few people sitting in a movie theater looking on a screen, and they are, what do they see? They see the World Trade Center as a metaphor of the Chinese wall. Why? Because I found out that, in history, on the recent history as well, big governments, rulers, kings, and so forth, dictators and so forth, always try to build something bigger and bigger and bigger. And it goes in history and it goes now as well. Even in our times, you have... So the Chinese wall was something huge, but also the Trade Center was something to be proud of as the highest and the tallest building on Earth. As solid as it was, the Twin Tower fell down, unfortunately. Terrible tragedy, and we're not going to go into this. But so the Chinese wall was...
So we can probably show those work in our website after our conversation.
Okay, sure.
It will be one of the photos that I also like is the Black Knight and White Knight. But I'm interested, you chose the topic because you knew the Wall Street and you had your critical aspect. But I wonder, how do you choose your subjects? How do you choose...
Well, in that case, maybe I should really finish. I'm sorry I am talking maybe too long, but you ask why did I do this series? At the beginning, I had a lot of criticism on Wall Street. I was pretty upset with some of the things which I thought were immoral, practiced by Wall Street. And then I was thinking, like many CEOs and so forth, to write a book and tell about my experiences and some of the bad experiences too. And then I said, I'm going to write a book. I have quite a few friends which were CEOs of successful company, more successful, less successful, who wrote books. Who the hell is reading these books? I mean, their friends are buying it. It's not common that such a book is becoming a bestseller. And I thought, I'm going to write a book. A few hundreds, maybe a few thousands will read it. People will not know. I want to point my view and raise my view in a different way, not by a book, but maybe by something that will raise or get more attention. By the way, I was wrong. It didn't get more attention. It got some attention, mostly in Israel, not so much in the US, and not so much elsewhere. So I was not right. So writing a book is not good enough, but also... So that's why I decided to create a stage photography series on Wall Street.
Okay, I mean, some of those photos we will publish on our website so people can see. Personally, I like a lot White Knight and Black Knight, which also terms coming from Wall Street. So I want to go back to this question because you obviously have different series of photography. And now I wonder, how do you choose to start a series?
It's a lot of experimenting and curiosity and coincidence. These are the three terms I would use in how it starts. For example, the box, I'm not going to go into the details of how it came into being, but I, by coincidence, was at a point where there was something similar to the box, but it wasn't a box. And I liked what the result was. And then I decided to create, by carpentering myself, a wooden box, which I started carrying with me in different locations.
Different boxes, different materials.
Different boxes, different materials, whether wood or glass or metal, and in different locations, different weather conditions, and so forth. A lot of experimentation and trial and error, basically.
And those photos we can also put on the website.
Sure.
So, you mentioned kind of one characteristic. You mentioned curiosity. And before we go deep into curiosity, I wonder, are there different characteristics that are essentials for both the artist and the entrepreneur?
Some for sure. I'm not sure that everything is similar. Maybe I'll start with some differences, not similarities. I wanted to say that entrepreneurs usually are, and we'll discuss why entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs and why a real entrepreneur is doing what he's doing. But definitely part of it is economical based. Success, being an entrepreneur, is by, say, taking a company that has a successful product, futuristic product, it is successful with the public, it goes public, and there's a lot of financial returns to the entrepreneur himself. Artists usually are less motivated by economy. Again, some artists which are very successful, they will have tremendous return by successful art. We know that, and we know names. I think within the art community, you see less drive that is motivated by money. Entrepreneurs are more motivated by money, although it is also true to say the real good entrepreneurs, this is not their number one driver.
Yeah.
This is not the number one driver. This is a side effect for them. This is something they want to either change the world for reasons that are big subject, to solve some problems. They want to prove to themselves or to their fathers how good they are. No, I'm not joking. Many entrepreneurs are frustrated kids of there were some studies about that, on the fathers that were always critical of them. And they always feel that they need to prove something to their father, even if he's not existent anymore. But they want to show, look how successful I am. You always said that I'm not good enough and I will not succeed and this and that. And so many entrepreneurs have this drive. Entrepreneurs want to, they like to lead. They like to change. They're very curious people. They're interested in things.
So what are the similarities? Because you start to speak and I see similarities to artists.
The similarities are the ability of trial and error, going into the direction of trial and error. Curiosity, I think, is also similar. The artist is always trying. Both of them are starting with a clean slate, with basically a white canvas. And they need to decide, what am I going to do now? You sit in front of this white canvas with your paints, and usually you will also see that most famous artists always also work by series. Artists, photographers, usually they have series. So a painter, for example, or a sculptor, you will always see a certain series of works, not just a single one, and then later something entirely different. So something intrigued him to start a certain direction, a certain way of seeing. If you look at Van Gogh, if you look at the Impressionists, and they made a change compared to the ones that were before the Impressionists. And gradually you see the development. If you look at modernism and postmodernism, it's always something that is coming into mind after a lot of trial and error and a lot of thinking. Entrepreneurs are similar in that respect. You are looking around you, you're looking at different directions and making 2 + 2, trying to see how you can make it into a 5, not just a 4. So as I mentioned, photography, it was chemistry and physics. Or if you look at Viruval with the HIV, it was the ability of seeing the creation of the machines for synthetic peptides, which is something entirely new. And on the other hand, the virologist that succeeded in sequencing the structure of the HIV virus. Those were two very famous virologists, one from France, Luc Montagnier, and Bob Gallo in the United States. So bringing these two totally different ones suddenly enabled you to create a new product for diagnostics of AIDS. If you look at VocalTec, then suddenly the emergence of IP enabled the emergence of ability of digitizing voice and using algorithms to basically compress that voice into small amounts of data that can be shipped or sent over large area networks, wide area networks, and suddenly it has the IP, which is common everywhere. And now you can take and send voice from one continent to the other. And now you can speak over WhatsApp or Messenger by Facebook.
So I want to say, you mentioned trial and error and you mentioned curiosity. And I'm wondering, I'm often being asked, can someone develop actually curiosity? And is it even possible to develop curiosity?
I don't know. I have 5 grandchildren, and I'm trying always to raise their curiosity. And
How do you do it?
By taking books for kids, which has interesting subjects, obviously interesting for me. So I'm taking biology, zoology, robotics, all kinds of things. And you see among my grandchildren, which are the oldest 16 and the youngest 3, and they're 5 altogether. They have their own natural interest in specific areas. I have one, she's 9. And she has she loves dogs since day one. She's the whisperer to the dogs. She's amazing with dogs. Among the other 5, you have others that are infatuated or like dogs, but not like her. Since she was a baby, she was with the dogs all the time, and it seems she speaks with them and they speak with her. And now, a week ago, I visited them. We are basically meeting every week. And she showed me a book about zoology and biology. And she showed me a book about cockroaches and about all kinds of insects. And she had tremendous interest in those insects. And I started, I was in the biology class in high school, and I always was attracted to biology. And she shows the same pattern. It seems natural. It doesn't seem that anybody in her family, her parents, or anybody pushed her that direction. I have another grandson.
So
he is into robotics. He is very much into robotics and, the space and the...
So it's natural curiosity.
It's natural curiosity, yes. Now, you probably can enhance that to some extent, but I'm not sure that it's not natural.
Okay. Picasso said that every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist when we grow up, and part of it is curiosity. And in previous conversation, you actually said that, it's the education system that kills it, this natural curiosity. Yeah. And that's why I'm kind of interested to understand how, even if it's possible to develop it, but maybe you try to do something else because you taught a course on entrepreneurship and creativity in business and art for business school students. Right. So you actually try to merge the disciplines, and just like you said at the beginning, often innovation or creation happens when we actually connect the unconnected. Can you tell us more about this course, why you actually taught this course and what you were trying to transmit in this course?
Sure. I remember the natural evolution of how this happened. I was invited by different business schools in the past quite a few times, maybe many times, to discuss things about the companies I was involved, mainly VocalTec, which was a business case in the Harvard Business School and elsewhere, other places too. And at some point, after years that I was doing that here in Israel, I was once asked by a professor in one of the business schools if I would agree again to come and discuss things about VocalTec. And I said, no, it's boring. I'm a guy who gets bored quite easily, and enough is enough. But if you wish, this was towards the end of 2006, which means I was already 1 year in art school. So I said to her, if you wish, I am willing to do something else. I am willing to give a workshop, 10, 12, 14 meetings to business school students about creativity in art and business. Now, why did I mention that? And that came to me kind of instantly. I met her in a social event, and she asked me if I would come and speak, and that was my answer. And I was totally terrified when she came back and she said that the dean accepted and they will give me the time for a workshop a whole semester for students. Now I had to think really seriously, what am I going to do? How I'm going to do that? No, but there was a base idea there. In art school, they were teaching you how to deal with the white canvas, which I was talking about earlier. And there are even books, Julia Cameron, The Artist Way, it's a famous book. And she also is trying to provide artists or artists-to-be ways of how to enhance your creativity. So, for example, one thing she said there is keep a little notebook next to your bed, and first thing you wake up in the morning, write down your dreams. Your dreams are an interesting source of subjects for your next art project, okay? So simply write it down. They teach you art has been there for hundreds and maybe thousands of years, and artists had developed over the years ways of enhancing their own creativity. Of course, we said earlier that creativity is something which is also characteristic you're born with or not, but you can enhance it. Everyone can enhance it. So if you are very talented and you will enhance it, you will become even better. But even if you're not very talented with your creative abilities, you can still enhance it by going through some exercises. So, for example, this thing of writing your own dreams in the morning, because everybody knows you forget the dreams half an hour later. You wake up, initially you say, whoa, what a dream, what a nightmare, what this and that. But if I'll ask you an hour later, you forgot it. So writing it down right away before you are even getting out of bed is an important thing to do. Because then those ideas, which are usually quite strange or crazy or whatever. So I decided I'm going to take some of those exercises expressed by Julia Cameron or by my teachers in art school, and I will bring them into the business side and see. Now, there were a few notions in the base of that idea. One notion was that everyone has some level of creativity, okay? Some people less. So I wanted first to select my students by interviewing them before accepting them into class to see that they have a minimal creativity capabilities. If they're totally, square-minded, I don't want them in my class, to be honest.
It's unusual to actually interview your students and not allow everyone to register.
That's what I did, and that's exactly what the dean said to me, that I'm the first so-called teacher at school there that did that, because they want as many students as possible in class. I limited it to 25 because I had exercises to do and I need to check those exercises. I cannot have hundreds of people in my class. Registration was fantastic, but I did interview every one of the students. And I asked them, it was a 5 to 10 minutes interview with each one, not more. I wanted to know if they read books, what kind of books, if they see movies, if they have any hobbies, what kind of hobbies they have, what is their interest. I asked them, for example, one question which was always interesting. I asked my students at the interview level, before accepting them, you just got a phone call and apparently, or a letter, you had an unknown uncle who died, passed away, and left only you an inheritance of $100 million. What do you do? You are now in business school, second year, third year. Obviously, I asked you, why are you in business school? And most of them answered, to make money. But now I just gave you the answer, you just got $100 million. So that means you have enough money for you, for your kids, and for your grandkids. So are you staying in business school? Because you said you want to make money. And now you have money. So why would you stay? What would you do? The answers were amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Why?
Because 9 out of 10 said, no, I am not going to stay and I'm not going to stay. So what are you going to do? I'm going to study art. I'm going to play the piano. Every one of them had something and wanted to do things which had to do with the right side of the brain, not the left side of the brain. Something in the spiritual side of things and not on the material side of things. Now the material has been, settled. I got $100 million. It was amazing to see how each one of them had other motives in them. This was a good answer for me. I mean, those that want to make money as a part of... And then at class, I was, the final test or exercise for them was, you bring me towards the end of the semester one work done in any form you want, a photograph, a poet, a piece of music, something, prose you wrote. I mean, anyway, painting, sculpture. You do whatever you want and bring me something that will express an emotion. Just express an emotion.
They needed also to explain why they did what they did?
Yes, but only after the work they've done, which was basically displayed in class and discussed by the whole students before they explained what they did. And we, me, the professor, and them, the other students, had to look at the photograph and understand why sadness is what is being expressed. Now, if you take emotions like sadness, like happiness, like jealousy, like anger, any one of the emotions, and try to think how you would express it, Not in a most obvious way.
Obvious, yeah.
This is easy, If you will show me a photograph of somebody trying to stab someone else, obviously you're showing hatred and I don't know, jealousy maybe a little bit or so. No, show me more subtle ways. The works that the students brought back were amazing. I showed that in the school to other professors in the school, and the school deans decided they're going to make an exhibition out of these works. The works were amazing. So they made an exhibition, and then someone from the school invited art critics from the press, the general press. And they came, and there were critics in the general press in Israel about this art exhibition by students of business. It was amazing to see. It was really, to me, it was a huge satisfaction. I was really enjoying it. But it was fun.
So, unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I want to kind of ask you maybe one last thought, comment, maybe tip, recommendation. Many of the things that I do actually relate to the world of entrepreneurship and business. I want to hear from your perspective. Why would you recommend business professionals to actually get to know artists, get to know art, get to know the way they think in their world?
I think it's really very important for business people. I'm not saying entrepreneurs. I'm saying business people, which has in the term business people, there are some that are entrepreneurs and some that are more professional business people that are good operators or things like that. I think for them to understand the humanistic sciences, including art, it's not just art, but basically it's all kind of art. It can be literature, it can be music, but understanding what motivates artists and understanding how art is being expressed and developed is something that will develop their own creativity. I think it's very important because, some of the exercises I did with my students in class for creativity in art and business, it was showing a specific... I brought into this class also important entrepreneurs and asked them to give examples of problems they had during their business life which they solved in a creative manner, not in a natural manner. So, for example, I was asking my students, tell me, you are running a startup and you ran out of money and you have to raise additional capital. How would you do that in a creative manner? Meaning, creative is not going to the venture capitalists. This is, selling them. That's a normal way. That's not creative. Yeah. I want you to bring me an idea which is totally out of the box, how you can raise additional capital by, this is one example. So these are things which you will learn by understanding other way of thoughts. And art is very good at teaching you other ways of thought.
Yeah. I always say that art is an open-ended, and what's beautiful is that it shows you reality of life, is that there is, for every problem, there are multiple solutions. Elon, I wanted to say big thanks for taking the time and coming over here pleasure. And sharing all your thoughts and experiences. And with that, thank you very much, our listeners, to joining us and hearing this intersection of art, entrepreneurship, photography, science, and creation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nir. I always enjoy the interaction with you. You are a unique person, and your understanding of things that not too many people, unfortunately, understand, and promoting it, hence art and creativity into the business world, is something I am very much in favor of, as you obviously understand, and I think you're doing a phenomenal job. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. We are producing our podcast without any ads, and we are relying on our community's direct support. People like you, our listeners. So if you find it valuable, I will be super grateful if you could spread the word by leaving a rating and maybe a review. It will take you just 30 seconds to do so, and it is very helpful in getting these ideas to a wider audience. If you are interested to develop your artistic mindset, if you are looking to grow your business, if you want to develop the innovation competencies in your organizations, I will highly recommend you to check our workshops and trainings. all available on our website. This episode was recorded from Google for Startups Creator Studio in Tel Aviv. Check out Google for Startups website to learn more about their support for entrepreneurs. The episode was mixed and mastered by Daniel Duran. You can subscribe to the RTN podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our previous shows are available on our website, www.thertian.com/podcast. Each episode includes show notes, guest recommendations, videos, and other materials. We can also be found on our LinkedIn page, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us directly via email at podcast@thertian.com. So I will be waiting here for you in the next episode with me, Nir Hindi. Once again, thanks for listening.